Welcome to Modern Farm Business Podcast. This podcast is designed to help the farm leader bring their business to the next level. We'll cover everything from leadership and finance to strategy and planning. I'm your host, Dean Hefta. As farms have become more complicated, an area that rarely can get too much attention is the farm's communication systems. I think of a communication system as all of the channels, methods, and messages that we use to keep everyone informed and to help information flow up, down, and across all of the people involved. Our systems might include things like phone calls, text messages, group messaging apps, whiteboards, meetings, two-way radios, every channel you can think of for getting information out and around. Today, we're talking about meetings. It's one of the key elements of any good communication system. Simply said, any event where two or more people are exchanging information at one time can be considered a meeting. Today, we're digging into things that can help your business have more effective meetings and try to avoid some of the meeting pitfalls. What's interesting is people in large organizations often complain about too many meetings. Employees will spend 4, 5, or more hours of their day simply going from meeting to meeting. But in small companies, we can suffer from sometimes too few of meetings. We rely on the informal communication and assume that just because we're close to somebody in proximity, that people are informed of what's going on. So, quick disclaimer, I'm going to cover different types of meetings, but that doesn't mean that each of them have a place or are right for your operation. You need to focus on what is the least amount of communication that is necessary for the people in the business. The key word is necessary, and that will be different for different operations, and it'll be different depending on the season. Focus on the need, and then fill that in with the solution when it comes to communication. Okay, types of meetings. Let's start with the daily huddle. This is the shortest, simplest, and most informal of all of the meetings. The purpose is to get everyone together, discuss the priorities for the day, might be even what's coming tomorrow, so focusing on today and tomorrow, who's going to be doing what, and maybe who needs help. The huddle is often at the start of the day. It's really short, typically only 10 or 15 minutes, and for a lot of organizations, they don't even sit down. They stay standing because they don't want anybody getting too comfortable. So how do you know if it's going well? Well, what you'll find is fewer people are complaining that they don't know what's going on. You'll find that people are leaving the meeting and they're more focused on the day. They know what the priorities are and who's doing what. That's what you'll observe if it's working. Now, how do you know if it's not working? Well, people are skipping it. They're taking way too long. Instead of a 10-minute meeting, it's turning into a 40-minute meeting. People start checking out and looking at their phones because they're not getting value out of it. Topics end up getting off target, off topic, and they don't really have to do with what we're needing to focus on today. People maybe get into debates about, here's an example, they debate whether we should build a bin next year or not. That's not a huddle topic. That's something that is important to have a parking lot so you can put that onto, and we'll talk about parking lots later. So that's the daily huddle. The next type is what I call the weekly meeting. It's typically a bit longer. It might be 30 or 40 minutes, only as long as it must be. And it focuses on what's coming that we need to be prepared for over the next couple of weeks. So the leader should come to that with a vision of what are the priorities the next couple of weeks. But this should really also be a discussion. It isn't just me showing up with, here's the 3 things that we need to talk about, and that's all we're going to talk about. It's facilitating the discussion of everybody involved. So everybody's coming with a perspective that you want to make sure gets brought out in the meeting, that they might be seeing things that you haven't thought about. And that's why having that open discussion is so valuable. The goal is really to come together, lay out the main thing that we have to be working on, what's coming up, the priorities, because we don't want to get cornered or surprised all of a sudden at the end of this week that people didn't know what was coming. So how you know it's going well is people, again, are engaged, They're sharing what they're seeing. They're asking for more clarification of what's coming. It can be the place where we're getting more of the labor coordinated. So if you know that you've got 50,000 bushels that have to get shipped out at the end of this week, you can talk about who's going to need to be involved in that and how are we going to coordinate our priorities knowing that that's coming later in the week. Now, if it isn't going well, it's evident because people skip the meeting. Maybe they get into discussions about the past, complaining about what happened 3 weeks ago, or maybe they're talking about stuff way too far out in time, or could be they're talking about stuff that's too granular. So you want to dial in the time frame and the topics depending on the type of meeting that you're in. The next one I'm going to talk about is what I call the seasonal prep meeting. It's really about getting together pre-planting and pre-harvest, and it gets everybody on the same page as far as what do we need to be getting ready for this next big event. It could be reviewing maintenance priorities, doing safety training. It's your chance to lay out expectations maybe for the hours and time off and those types of things to get people focused on the next season. It's really a chance to think a few months ahead, look at some bigger priorities that we need to focus on, and then you can break that down so those priorities can fit into more of your weekly and daily type topics. The next meeting is the annual strategic. Now, up until now, pretty much everybody has been involved in the operation in the meetings, part-time, full-time, you name it. As you move into the annual strategic, this is more focused on the business of the farm. And so typically the participants are going to be more of the key decision makers that are involved. And what this meeting does is it asks different questions that really focus on the next 1 to 5 years of the business. You can see that time horizon keeps moving out in each of these meetings. Its priority is really related to where's the farm going? What are the decisions that have to be accounted for as we move forward? It might be wrestling with staffing issues, transition planning, the types of businesses that we're in or entering into, financial decisions, capital investments, all of those major things that are really much more long-term in their impact and magnitude when it comes to the operation. And a lot of times these meetings are most successful if they have a good facilitator. Something that we've done for a lot of operations is provided facilitation so that everybody in the business can focus on the business and not on the process that has to be used to make sure that the meeting is successful. Now, these meetings might last a couple of days, and you're really getting into and wrestling with the future. What do we have to do this coming year to make sure that as we think about 4 and 5 years into the future, we're in the right direction? Now, the final meeting that I'm going to talk about is the ad hoc. So the ad hoc meeting is really just for special purposes. It's not a scheduled meeting, but rather it's a meeting that we can use. It's a structure we can use that when a topic comes up that we either didn't expect, or maybe we can't wait for a weekly or a seasonal type meeting, a bigger meeting, this is a chance for us to know who do we need to pull together? How are we going to talk about this? What's the meeting going to be like? How are we going to make decisions? Maybe it's a land or an equipment opportunity. Could be some new high-value crop opportunity. We don't have a lot of time to decide on it. We got to get the right people together and work through the decision. This allows us to know ahead of time, who do we need to pull together? How are we going to make the decision? Keeps the discussion on topic so that we can focus efficiently on what we're talking about and we don't get sidetracked by other issues. And a lot of times it can be really helpful to even put a time constraint onto it, saying that we're going to talk about this for 60 minutes, and at 60 minutes, we're going to end the discussion. That type of a constraint can actually really focus our energy and force us to come to some decisions. Okay, so we've covered the daily huddle, the weekly planning meeting, the seasonal meeting, the annual strategic, and the ad hoc meeting. Now, let's cover some tools and tips for good meetings. The first is consistency. If we say yeah, let's get together each week. It's not going to happen unless it's on the calendar, and it really becomes a part of the rhythm of the farm. Some people, every Monday morning, they get everybody together. Others have found Friday afternoon or Saturday morning, they get the teams together. So the key is getting it scheduled and sticking to it. If we're going to do a huddle each morning at 7:30, make sure it happens every morning at 7:30. That me as the leader isn't rolling in at 7:45 and starting the meeting, and then the next day, 7:20 and starting the meeting. It's making sure everybody knows what to expect. And if the meeting is helpful and beneficial to the people, they'll want to be a part of it, and they'll make a point to be there. The next tool is what I call facilitating versus telling. When we lead a meeting, sometimes we can feel the pressure to set up the agenda, to do all the talking, and to have all the answers. It's really easy to slip into telling mode. But great meetings are actually facilitated. The person facilitating the meeting doesn't have to be the person in charge or the person that owns the business, but a lot of times it ends up being that way. What you need is the person that's leading the meeting, whoever it is, to have the ability to focus on the process of the meeting, how we are going to make decisions, how we are going to move through the topics. They need to focus on the pace of the meeting, making sure that we don't get stuck on or spend too much time in one place. And the people in the meeting, making sure that people are getting involved and there's buy-in and conversation that doesn't allow for just a handful of people to dominate the conversation. They're also responsible for making sure we bring decisions to a conclusion rather than just breezing by or touching on topics. So with this in mind, regardless of who is in charge of the meeting, be sure you have someone that's focused on the meeting process and not just the topics. Another tool is the parking lot. I referred to this earlier, and it can be a really useful tool. Since these different meetings have different purposes, maybe someone in a daily huddle starts talking about a shed that we need to clean out for an event we're having in 3 months. Well, a parking lot is a place where topics that do need to be discussed can be moved to and revisited later. So I'd say, I'm glad you brought that up. We're going to want to have a plan for that. Let's get that on the board and talk about it in the Friday meeting. That way the topic is acknowledged, but we're not getting derailed in the moment by a 30-minute discussion on something that is well beyond what our priority is today. Finally, is a tool that I call what, who, when. When decisions come up in a meeting, what must happen is getting each decision pinned down and clear what is the action. Who is going to be responsible for it, and when will it be done? Too often in meetings, we make decisions, leave, and then a month later we're frustrated that stuff didn't get done. It all goes back to how we handle it in the meeting and that we're ensuring clarity of what must get done. So, quick review. 5 kinds of meetings: the daily huddle, weekly planning, seasonal prep, annual strategic, and the ad hoc. Not all are necessary for your business. Use what works. Remember, communicate as little as necessary, but recognize that that might mean you feel like you're communicating more than you need to. The key really goes back to what is necessary for the team. Also, the tools you use. What's the rhythm that you can set for the meeting schedules? What's the right time of day and frequency? Think facilitation to make sure people are involved, that they stay on topic and focus on the decisions. Use a parking lot to hold ideas and topics until they can be properly dealt with. And finally, be diligent about using the who, what, when to ensure the execution of decisions and to increase accountability. I hope this has been helpful for your communication system. You can get the PDF summary of this topic at this episode on modernfarmbusiness.com. If there's something you like about Modern Farm Business, maybe there's something you don't like. Regardless, send me an email at dean@modernfarmbusiness.com. You can also find us on Twitter at myfarmbusiness or Facebook at Modern Farm Business. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.